Well, my name is Greg Brannon. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate this. Do you guys hear that?
You speak a little louder.
Do you hear that? Do you hear that?
Yes.
No, I'm asking a question. Are we hearing something? That's our founding generation rolling in their grave. Rolling in their grave. If core principles can be compromised, they're not core principles. The reason why I ran for office was because I hear about this idea of the 80-20, 80% commonality and 20% difference, let's get together. We have 6 pages in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights. The question is either we believe in the Declaration of Independence, what it stands for, or we don't. I heard you talk about Common Core. Actually, I wrote a book on it right now. I've written papers on it. We can go over that a little bit later. But more importantly is it's the core principles. I want to know the commonality. Public-private partnerships is where the power of the government uses their coercive and compulsion to use our funds. All funds come from us. It's our private property to pick winners and losers. End of story. Obama ran on that in 2008. I read every single word of Obamacare. I read every single word of Dodd-Frank. I read every single word of Burr's plan. Where in Article 1, Section 8 is nationalized health care. It's not there. James Ardell, one of our founders, he was the first Supreme Court Justice appointed by George Washington. He was a Federalist who wanted the Constitution. In our debate in Hillsborough, 117 pages, you could read his words concerning the Supremacy Clause, Article 6, Clause 2. The Ninth Amendment, the idea that a function of Article 1, Section 8. He said the only thing that will keep our liberty is that each individual is jealous enough to fight for it. Yeah. When our founders pledged their life, their fortune, their sacred honor, they meant it. They may have compromised on what type of structure that's going to be, but they never left the birth certificate of Declaration of Independence. The only thing I said every single 120,000 miles I drove across the state was, who is sovereign and what is truly the legitimate role of a government? And both those are answered in the second paragraph of our Declaration. The Creator made you in His image. You are sovereign because you're a steward here. You have life from the moment of conception to natural passing. In this room, I said I'd never waver on 2 things, life or the Constitution. Number 2, liberty. It's actually a Latin word meaning to live the potential God made in you. And the pursuit of happiness encompasses your failures, your successes, your freely association, and that's it. There is no compromise on those. Because the very next sentence says, to secure those rights, a government instituted amongst men, driving their just powers, consent to the governed. The people being governed are the sovereign as individuals, not the collective. How do you compromise on that? It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And I believe right now we are on this precipice of making history. If we don't sell for the crumbs off the table, when we're the sovereign as we sitting at the table, things will change. That's why I never attack anybody's individual ever. I never will. That is the role of government. The structure is very, very important. When I'm in surgery, I was just in there a couple hours ago, I got to go back to my core principles to stop the bleeder. I can't just randomly decide what to do. The structure is this. The individual's on top, because the Creator made us in His image. We need to have a society. Government came after us. Government is either your tool or your master. Makes it a terrible master. We acted in our sovereignty, gave a local government and a state government certain, they call police powers, and they're structured under the Constitution. That is, again, the Constitution is under the sovereign. It oversteps its bounds, it's not illegitimate. A law is not law. This is based in God's natural law. Certain functions so that we can live, work, enjoy our life, and freely associate. To make a more perfect union, those 13 states gave an agent to them, under them, a federal government. And to disperse power from men who will corrupt other men, they disperse it even further. That's the Constitution. The legislative branch has 33 functions. The executive 13. There's only one power solo. That's to actually say hello to ambassadors. And the judicial branch has 6. None of it's to make a law. They are only to supervise over the 18 functions in Article 1, Section 8. Anything else is left to the people and or the states. Washington said the amount of tyranny you'll live under is the amount of tyranny you'll accept. So now we're trying to fight over the crumbs. I'm done. I didn't drive all these miles, miss my lovely wife, my 7 kids, because I wanted to do something, to have a political power, to be used, to work our rear ends off, to be used by the established per se. What do they think of us? Ask McConnell. Ask Rove. Ask Mr. McDaniels, who was an acquaintance of mine on the phone. Ask him. Either the Republican Party, which I've been since I was born, either it is Goldwater and Coolidge, it is either Cruz, Lee, and Paul, or it's a progressive party. There's no in between. Senator Burr said the most ridiculous thing he ever heard was Senator Cruz saying defund. Senator Cruz said he could not defund it, but the House could. Article 1, Section 7, Clause 1 gives the power for all bills in there. So who knows the Constitution? Who does not? That's what this is all about. So the question, are we going to be jealous enough in our liberty not to be used or persuaded? See, if you compromise on, the example I use, maybe it's Tried or something like that, is this beautiful restaurant, bring us all in the room in here, and says, okay, we're in the room now, before we can leave, we must decide what kind of wallpaper to put in here, or what color to paint the walls, or redo the carpet, but we must make that decision before you leave the room. The first question you ask yourself is, did the restaurant give us a contract to change the decor? If the answer is no, then our opinion on decor is irrelevant. There's no federal education, no federal health care. Power to tax, the power to destroy. Marshall used that because the states were destroying the federal embark on the Bank of Maryland. We have to understand who we are. Our representatives are our servants, not to give us things, but to be agents, trustees to that contract they swore to uphold. What saddened me was the lack of people that understood, even read the 6 pages and named the 18 functions. Because in Article 6, they're sworn to uphold this contract. So if we're going to would you sacrifice getting the best surgeon you could? Would you sacrifice the best pilot you could fly if you're going to pick the pilot yourself? No. The most important person in this whole spectrum is the person in the mirror. In 1840, starting education, my wife and I were very fortunate to help start 2 Christian schools, and we homeschool now. But in 1840, the average American's complex literacy was 93 to 100%. Within 1 generation of slavery, 85% were complex literate. Education does not equal schooling. Does not equal schooling. Well, right now we decide about which masters we're going to vote for, who could redistribute our property. And the thing that could bind this and tie them all up is called fiat currency, a gold standard. From 1792 to 1913, based on a gold standard that was passed in 1792, that's to the detail of what weight measures are. In Proverbs 11:1, it said God hates a false scales. Our founders read that, so Congress made what a certain monetary value would be. A gold piece was 271.25 grains of gold. The silver piece was 375.5 grains of silver. 10 of those equals 1 of those. Now go try an economy. Our dollar increased in value 17% over that 130 years. When private banks got involved, our dollars decreased 98% in the last 100 years. But those who get the trillions, first, buy the assets, trickle down, that's called inflation. That destroys pension plans, insurance plans, your ray of life. This anniversary, August 18th, President Nixon, by executive order, took us off the quasi-gold standard called Bretton Woods. From 1971 to today, our dollars decreased 85%. In the mid-70s, America had the highest quality of life and way of life with one working family. Now we have 2, and we've decreased 17%. The only country in Western civilization that's decreased in actually take-home pay. Why? I blame only one person, me. I abdicated my role. So when we get to know the structure, we get men and women that will honor that oath, and we hold them accountable to that. And standing up for what truth is immediately, there's no compromise on truth. You just cannot do that. So either we are a Judeo-Christian country that has a secular government based upon Judeo-Christian principles that lets everybody, and think about this, a bunch of Christian men put in the contract, the Constitution, in Article 6, there's no religious test. When I went with a bunch of pastors last summer, we were talking about politics and stuff like that, and I said, if Jesus was in the room today, would he make you join him? And they were quiet. They thought about it, and they answered truthfully, no. It's a free gift. So why want the arm of the government to get involved in every part of our life? But its function is to protect life. That's not a social issue. That is a societal issue. So I believe we're on that precipice right now to make a decision. To make a decision. Education. The Department of Education has no standards. How they manipulate that is with money. That's our money. You say no. I believe our Constitution, this North Carolina Constitution, has public schools way too big. The smaller things are, the more decentralized things are, the better they are. And we centralize healthcare and education. And even worse, you got a person on the board decide what kind of interest rates there are for the economy of the world. And that's smart. When true markets is when individuals make those true decisions, how things work. A president, ever heard of Ronald Reagan? He wanted to know where your income tax dollar goes to run the government, called the Grace Report. Well, Greg, of course the income tax goes to run the government. What house do we run the government? Today, 2/3 of all the money the government raised to run the government comes in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. The other third comes from income taxes. And it doesn't go to run the government. It goes to pay interest on the debt to a private bank, the Federal Reserve. That's why this message started. I started doing this thing 6 years ago, 7 years ago. I started reading and studying. It just did not make sense when 2 + 2 was not equal 4 anymore. So be optimistic. Do not be used by me or anybody. Understand that one page of the Declaration to know who what our birth certificate is. Know that philosophy was not changed in our first Constitution, called the Articles of Confederation. And then 11 years after the Declaration, our second Constitution, which is the longest living Constitution in the history of the world, other than Massachusetts, theirs is 1780, written by John Adams. And the Bill of Rights. And read the preamble to the Bill of Rights, I beg you. The Constitution is 6 pages that chains the representatives. Not you and me, it chains them. Then the Bill of Rights. If you read the introduction to it, the preamble, it says, we're writing these things so you do not misconstrue that you're chained down, that we have no implicit power. It chains and leaves you alone. So the Constitution changed the government where they must do their service. The Bill of Rights is on the other side where they can't even have an opinion. The 9th Amendment, because they know you actually cannot name all your inalienable rights. They're innumerable. The 9th Amendment says that, and the 10th says all the powers go back to the people of the state, if it's not listed there. Again, we don't need another constitution. We don't need another convention. We don't need any of that stuff. We just need men and women to hold them. But the people, or the individuals that do that, are we the people Washington said about. We are the true keepers of the Constitution. We are. I was given this shirt by Robin Hayes at a convention a year and a half ago. Like I got done giving a speech. He goes, Greg, I've been waiting years to get to somebody. And then Robin, you wants to use that power and that passion. I've met with many people in the Republican establishment from D.C. around. They want our passion and then believe we have nowhere else to go. I believe that there's no more of that. Because if we compromise on what we believe, then why do we have any beliefs at all? I still want to know this 80-20 stuff. I want to know where things that are okay unconstitutional are okay. We would not accept that from our children. So I'm optimistic But we must fight Agenda 21 attack on private property. We must check another version of this idea of nationalized standards. That comes from the Carnegie Foundation of 1919, their papers, black and white, you can look it up, what their plan was over the 100 years, and we're there. It's no different than No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, Goals 2000. It's still taking our children who are not wards of the states. They're gifts from God. We don't need a better workforce, than a better education for us to be companies in. I believe the best generation of education the world's ever seen was not our founders, but their moms and dads. Mainly their moms, because dads are out doing other things. The mother raised the family, put food on the table, paid the bills, while dads were out fighting their stuff. They asked them to challenge everything. Everything. And they gave us this. And what did we do with it? It saddens me. It saddens me. The more of our servicemen have killed themselves by suicide the last 2 years than the Taliban. We've not declared war since World War II. NAFTA is destroying the economy of America. Free trade is not the government deciding who goes where. Free trade is you can get a better widget and sell it in the market and see who does well. The word regulate meant to make regular, not to hinder. As of October of last year, there are 176,122 federal regulations. In Obamacare, there's a regulation on what type of turtle you're bit by. There's a regulation, there's 2 regulations, if you walk into a lampstand the first time or more, multiple times.
There's one for getting burned by water skis.
Keep going, man, I've read them all.
There's one for getting hit by space debris.
Shakespeare, yeah.
Yeah.
No, actually, there's 3.
Yeah, that's right. There's 3.
So,
Might be
but
UFO.
The question is, we can laugh and look at that, but I've read the Burr plan. It's not different than Obamacare plan. See, I wrote a paper in 2010 thinking this out. There are basically 7 insurance companies in North Carolina. And there's been only one now, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and exchanges in every county, except for 4. I think First Carolina's the other one. But as of 2010, there were 267 health insurance companies in the United States. Constitutionally, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, the Commerce Clause, have no barriers at the state borders, have all 267 in our state competing for our dollar. Prices go down, quality goes up. In this state, if all of us here would open a hospital and compete, we have to go to the legislators to ask for their approval. That ain't free market. Texas doesn't have that. If we invest all our money, buy our land, build a building, and it falls apart, we lost our building. We lost our service. That's fine. See, this is why we have to know who we are. If you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. That's why that cliche is real. Oh, questions? Some questions here. You got it.
Statement. In the Constitution, it talks about the general welfare of the public. Would you define that as the government has to provide welfare to somebody?
Well, let's back up. That was taken word for word out of Article 3, Section 3 of the Articles of Confederation. There was 0 debate on that. They knew exactly what that meant. The General Welfare Clause was a geographical mean that all 13 would raise a tax for common defense and welfare. Period. End of story. There's no such thing as welfare taken from one to give to another. That's socialism.
But see, the problem is now is our youth are being taught that, because I just had that argument yesterday with a transgender co-worker who sat there and quoted me the Constitution, got to the general welfare and says that's the reason why government must provide welfare. I says, are you out your damn mind?
Well, the 2 things, the General Welfare Clause is actually in 2 places. The word general welfare in the preamble has no legal binding. The way the Constitution is a contract. The preamble gives you the introduction of it. The body of the Constitution sets the rules. The Bill of Rights ties it at the end. But it was word for word for general example. You ever heard of James Madison? Okay, General James Madison. Last day as president, March of 1817. Henry Clay sent it from Kentucky to him, came a week or so before, so we have some extra money from the federal government. Believe that, called the bonus bill. They had extra money without taxing us. And he said, I thought about building interstate highways and canals and harbors. Madison said, great idea. Then he vetoed it. I said, what should you veto it? You need an amendment to do that. There's nothing in Article 1, Section 8 that says you can do that. It took Eisenhower's defense authorization to get it done. So see, this is why we have to think and ask these things to be done. In Philadelphia, they had a 1656 English dictionary in the room at convention to look at the words when they wanted to do that stuff. The most important thing, I believe, is we have to do a little of our own homework. 3 men, Madison, Yates, and Martin, kept notes of every single day in Philadelphia. Every single day. You can look them up. You got Madison's books, beautiful, it's read, and what they debated on. On August 6th, they debated gold or fiat currency. It was gold, 9-2. Then when they said got done there, whatever they voted on Philadelphia was irrelevant. It's what the sovereign within the state decides, Article 7. That's why the votes were one state per vote. It's not just we the people. Henry hated the phrase we the people. It's we the people per state, not per this nation. So then went back to each state. And I happen to read every single note of every convention. Our state had 2, Hillsborough and Fayetteville. Hillsborough, we said no. 174-77. They're afraid of the federal government usurping their power. Massachusetts, New York, and Virginia said, we'll only accept it, but if you overstep your bounds, we can leave. The Virginia Convention is unbelievable. 666 pages with Madison, Henry, Randolph, Mason asking these questions. And they never left the philosophy of the individual sovereign. It was the best way to protect that. In Virginia, a quarter of it is Henry talking. He was a prophet. He warned about everything that occurred. Another side note, in Philadelphia, when Madison was trying to example what a state function was and what a federal government function was, he said the federal are few and defined. They thought if they met 4 months a year, it'd be too much. The state is what the state can decide as long as they're a republic form of government. There are plenty, there are many. But he said 2 examples that will never be a federal issue. Agriculture and banking. So what we need to do is to understand our position in this. After our Creator, we're the sovereign. And any time, any government, from local, state, or federal, makes a law that infringes on your inalienable rights, that means your property, your mind, your body, your thoughts, they overstep their bounds. And then Jefferson had the gall to list 20 things he called tyranny. If you think you're free, if you think you own your house, if you think you own your car, if you think you own any of your private property, why do we pay ad valorem tax every year? That was the first time in this state in 1939. Judge Jimmy and I talked about that about a couple years ago. He looked it up. 39, first time. But because of this welfare thought processes, our poor state workers are working their rear end off, trying to give everybody what they need and want. That's not the role of a government. Society's at its best when you keep everything you make, your thoughts, your body, your brain, and you freely associate. Nothing in history has lifted more people out of poverty than true laissez-faire. 1880s and 1890s in this country, we grew at a GDP of 6% per year with no inflated dollar. 60% a decade. A decade. And now since 71, our way of life decreased 17%, one worker versus 2, as I said before. That's why it's time not to be used. Now it's time to say we're back. And not here as a mumbo jumbo. Greg's a little complicated here. It ain't complicated. Okay, it's not complicated. You know what complicated is? Be a mom, raise a bunch of kids, and put food on the table. That's complicated. And what if those families at home, the single mom, the retiring guy who lost his job or whatever, what if they had all their income sources? That was theirs. That was theirs. A little side note how you manipulate things. In the early 1940s, late 40s, early 50s, a man named Lyndon Baines Johnson in Texas could not stand what the churches were doing because they were calling him out from the pulpit. So he passed the Johnson Amendment that churches would get a tax on 501(c). So a bunch of churches jumped in the bandwagon and took that, so they would pay taxes. In 1954, they were all exempt. What did churches pay in taxes in 1953? Before this exemption? Nothing. The First Amendment says they have no right to religion to infringe on them. Why'd they jump in bed with them? See, that's us too. I might like the government to do this for me, so I'll be okay with it, even though it goes over here. Tocqueville came to America in the 1830s, wrote a great book, Democracy America, and I'll go over that in a second. We're not a democracy. He mocked that because a democracy, read our founders. Madison said every democracy is in a tyranny and has killed itself. A democracy where the minority is crushed. We were never, ever, the first time the word democracy is used, it was by Woodrow Wilson, have World War I for democracy in the world. A democracy is not a republic. By definition, democracy is government by the people, majority rules. Republic is based on the rule of law, not the rule of men. Completely different. Completely different. When they took over the school system, they took the school system off. Every generation gets further down that path to forget who we truly are. So I'm hoping energetic. I'm hoping you're not going to use what they've told me. Greg, that you're insane. It's never going to change. At the end of the day, you got to go for any establishment. Sorry, I'm not for sale. Yes, ma'am.
What do we do now? I'm so frustrated over the loss that you suffered because...
Oh, no, but hey, I was nothing special.
No, but hear me out. I worked very hard. I know people who were working on the Mark Harris campaign. Now, Mark Harris is a good man, but he wasn't the candidate. He wasn't eloquent. He didn't know what you know. And if those Mark Harris people had come over to Greg Brannon, we wouldn't be stuck with Tom Tillis.
Well, let's go 50.
So it's monumental.
I think we should be
Frustrating.
optimistic. Let's go on Matt Bevin, my friend in Kentucky. He got a 40% of the vote. That's pretty impressive. McDaniel won almost without a runoff. Then it took this army of the establishment to come in and get that, right? In our race, 56% voted against the establishment.
Right.
Don't be pessimistic, okay? And I promised I would unite on the I believe our party, I believe the Republican Party is special. We are the party of the sanctity of life, the limited government. We believe in those principles.
Yeah, but they're
But
getting
my
away
question-
from the Constitution.
That's the problem.
And my question is, what happens now is Republicans take advice and become Democrat light, and now we have to make promises to people what we're going to give them
No.
in order for a Republican, and you have to gag yourself and vote so that you're not stuck with.
I'm going to disagree with that. I would not gag myself to vote. I'm not going to do that. So I'm not going to do that. I believe the God of the universe is sovereign. I believe the God of the universe is in charge. I believe if I make it home, it's because of Him. Today, the surgery, the baby delivered last night, was like because of Him. I have zero fear on what is going to happen.
Well, we have a responsibility.
That's why you got to do your work and make sure you do your diligence and understand. And forget this D, forget this. The D's are over here. They believe in big government. They believe in everything they stand for. They believe that you're not smart enough. So that to me is not even an issue. They're over here. Right now we're the crux. 100 counties that Democrats lost. Democrats lost registration in all 100 counties. That's a good sign. Republicans lost in 51.
But they're dead people.
Well, no, the fast-growing party in North Carolina is unaffiliated. What I'm planning on doing is the next X years is in our race, only 15% vote in the primary at all. That saddens me. But I don't blame them when they see no difference. I'm going to the 85% that did not vote. Ask why. Talk. I'm going to the other ones that aren't even part of our party. Talk why. And those the other party, I go talk why. Because I'm very pro-life, and I'm going to these natural pockets of areas that are very pro-life that vote Democrat, and just talk about the heartbeat at 39 days, brain activity 19. Because you're only going to change heart. This is why I ran. It was Romans 9. 12:9 says, very important. It says, hate evil, cling to good. But the first two words are the most important in genuine love. I find the hardest people to talk to are white, Christian, middle-class, Republican males. They know everything. So that's why it's important that we take all this facade away. America's great because America's so diverse of who we are. We're the only country where when you get a pure metal, they all have certain tendencies and strengths and weaknesses. If you get a bunch of those metals into an alloy, it's unbreakable. See, that's American spirit. That's who we are. That's exactly who we are. The problem is, we're gonna have Republicans vote and say, amnesty you must do. Obama, national security you must do. You know, education at the federal level you must do. And that's us. I believe when Reagan was asked, why did you leave the Democratic Party? He said, no, they left me. I believe we're in that same schism today. And I believe if we don't move, if we're that weather vane on the Constitution, the 6 pages, we have to ask them to disguise why they're superior to Madison and Jefferson. I believe we win that debate. Maybe not tomorrow, but victory is you get to speak. What if we were in China? See, we're the last bastion of republicanism the world's ever seen. Last 100 years, we've not been that. The progressives have been very patient, infiltrated every party, education, the church, healthcare, you name it. They've been there doing that. That's why when Reagan spoke, it was so wow. Or Goldwater spoke, it just stood out. I think the best president we had in the last 150 years is Grover Cleveland. Read his stuff. He's a Democrat. Gold standard, no low tariffs, no fight foreign wars. You know, American exceptionalism is we become a great military power called power to control. John Quincy Adams, who was the 6th president, and he wrote the Monroe Doctrine, says, we're not going to go around the world looking for monsters to destroy. If you mess with us, we'll fight to win. But we're not going to do that. And we're going to trade with everybody. What happened to that America? Now people know in our fiber that's who we are. So we get people that will start saying those things come every 2-year election cycle, and then after they win, they tell, well, why they can't do it. It's too complicated. We got to get this part in. I want to know. I'm 54 next week. So Reagan Revolution was my generation. How much smaller is the federal government since Reagan won office? With three Republican presidents. 6 times bigger. 6 times. So it's like doing it's called morbidity and mortality when you every week you review your bad cases and you want to look to get better. Well, let's not. Okay, what's insanity? Albert Einstein said. Over and over. Fool me once, okay.